So one of the capabilities of Webb is that you can take spectra of the debris of such events, and you can use those spectra to determine what they're made of. And in that way, you can try and answer, are they really actually forming these elements for the first time? We can go on. So, for example, in the past few years, we have gotten these images with ALMA, the Atacama Large Millimeter Array of protoplanetary disks, so disks forming planets around other stars. They show these beautiful rings and spiral patterns that are evocative of interactions with young planets embedded in the disk. We haven't seen those planets yet. There are programs with Webb to go and take images of those very same disks to try and see if we can detect the planets that ALMA suggests are there. We can also use the spectroscopic capabilities of Webb to tell what the material in these disks are made of, and particularly look for water, complex organics, and other chemical compounds that are important for life as we know it. And moving on to exoplanets, there's a tremendous amount of programs doing exoplanets. But just to mention a few, there's some that try to understand general properties of exoplanets, and there's some that look at exotic worlds. There's a program to look at the nearest stars, Alpha Centauri, and image that and look for planets in that system. Very exciting if they find something. There's a program to look at exoplanets orbiting so close to the central star that their surfaces are molten. They have clouds of rock and they may rain lava. Webb will be able to look at those and actually tell if that is the case. Are they raining lava? And we can go all the way to our own solar system. We recently had the New Horizons mission passing by the Pluto system. I thought that was so fantastic. I was so excited to see those amazing images of the Pluto current system. But that was just one example of a population we know is out there. There are many Pluto-like worlds out there that are frozen fossils of the early formation of our solar system. What Webb enables us to do is that we can actually observe all of those large numbers of them to measure what they are made of and get a much more whole understanding of our early solar system. And then finally, we had these discoveries of extrasolar comets. So
Estoy sumándome recién a la transmisión de NASA, cambiaron el sitio gracias a Marina que nos proporcionó cómo encontrarlo.
It is thought now that is actually a relatively common occurrence, and there are programs in the first year to make sure that if we find one of those during the first year of Webb science, Webb will be able to go and observe it and understand what it's made of and understand whether the composition of those objects are similar to comets in our own solar system. Again, not something that would have been predicted when Webb was made. And so we think this is really going to be characteristic of Webb, that it will continuously break new ground. And so this is just the first year. And in the following years, hopefully we'll have many new exciting programs that are based on previous JWST observations, and we'll continue to make strides.
Está hablando de todo lo bueno que viene, que vamos a tener justo con eso, ¿no?
That's wonderful. Now we're going to go to Bill and Scott because we have a couple questions that came in. First question is from Paul Marks. There is currently much work going on to perfect PROXOPS, orbital proximity operations, to refuel satellites or to repair them using robotic spacecraft. When Webb is on station, it's at a very lonely spot out at L2. Is there any way that any technical problems might be fixed by such a visiting robot?
So the JWST, unlike Hubble, was not designed to be serviced.
Bueno, están comparando lo que pasó con el Hubble cuando tuvo que ser reparado con el brazo robótico y dice que bueno, que justamente el Hubble no fue diseñado para ser reparado.
Thank you, Bill. Another question came in from Leo Enright. Can you be specific about launch windows? The current target is October 31st. What alternate launch dates are available?
En caso de no poder lanzarse el 31 de octubre, ¿cuándo son las próximas oportunidades, ¿no?
For TV planning.
¿Cuándo son las siguientes oportunidades de
There
lanzamiento?
are many. We are not unlike a planetary mission. We have launch windows almost virtually every day.
Casi
They're
todos los
very
días,
lengthy
dice,
in size,
podrían llegar a
typically in
lanzarse.
the morning. We don't
Típicamente
have
de
the exact
mañana.
time yet for the October 31st launch,
No tenemos
but we
la
have
hora
multiple
exacta, dice,
opportunities,
pero para esa fecha,
for launch if we have a
pero
delay,
generalmente
then
son de
that
mañana
may occur.
todas.
Thanks, Bill. There's a question for Scott from Don Heydrich from CBC, Canada. Are there any cameras mounted on the exterior of Webb to monitor the complex unfolding
¿Hay cámaras
sequence?
montadas fuera del telescopio para poder monitorizarlo? No. Muchos nos pidieron eso.
We have a telescope that operates at minus 400 degrees Fahrenheit, always in the shade, always in the dark. It's going to see light, but from its
Dice que va a estar operando a menos 400 grados Fahrenheit. Y del otro lado va a haber más 200 grados centígrados, del lado del que le da el sol.
Every wire that goes from the spacecraft to the telescope can affect the mission.
Dice, cada cable que va desde el telescopio a la nave para que transmita los datos, dice, puede ser afectado. Dice, todo ese lugar es estable termodinámicamente hablando, ¿no? Gracias, Marina. Muchísimas gracias por ese enlace.
You know, again, to have this camera at minus 400 wires sending data to a solid state recorder. So as we looked at it, it wasn't worth taking, say, the risk of adding things that could maybe even affect the mission. While that would be exciting data to have, and I know Bill can mention, there may be some cameras on the rocket that see it go away.
Right, there may be a camera or two inside the fairing that'll allow us to see JWST as it leaves the rocket. But right now, that's the only plan for cameras.
No planificamos jamás. Estoy mirando un poco más qué es lo que dicen.
What safeguards have you taken to avoid a Hubble flawed mirror situation? In other words, what did you learn from the Hubble mirror problem that you've
Canon dice, los cables
sure
están diseñados de nioibio y zafiro, al igual que los de las ondas espaciales. No estaba escuchando. Me quedé un poco colgado con que estamos teniendo problemas de transmisión.
Look at every step of the manufacturing of the mirrors all the way up through testing. But the really big risk mitigation that we did was down at the testing of the telescope down at Johnson Space Center in their Chamber A. This was the chamber that was built back in the Apollo area that was modified to become the largest cryogenic chamber in the world. We were able to deploy the entire telescope.
Dice que lo que están haciendo justamente ahora es desplegarlo totalmente el telescopio y están haciendo el proceso de alineamiento del telescopio. Cada espejo tiene motores detrás. Dice, permite cambiar la forma del espejo. Cosa que si tienen que cambiar algún elemento que está mal, lo hacen ahora.
Dr. Vila mentioned a process of figuring out which image comes from which mirror segment. What's the name of that process, Begoña?
It's called wavefront sensing and control, and it involves a very careful, detailed set of activities. And we have Lee here that will be able to give more details afterwards. But basically, you find the stars, you can move the mirrors, see which one moved to know which mirror it belongs to, and then start using those actuators that Bill indicated, making them all together.
Esos motores lo que hacen es usarlos para enfocar hacia el punto que quieren hacerlo.
From Emily Speck of CBS Orlando. During the first year of James Webb's life, how will researchers selected for observation hours learn how to use the telescope?
¿Cómo van a aprender los científicos para usar el telescopio en el primer año de trabajo, ¿no?
We've been working for years to train the community through a wide range of different types of training events. So this is
hemos estado años entrenando a la comunidad para el uso, ¿no?
And there's in the ground segment there's a system called proposal planning that helps users to do that. And
Dice que tienen un programa hecho justamente para ayudar a los usuarios, dice, a que...
a service tool.
Es como si fuera una herramienta, una service tool, dice, ¿no? Una herramienta de acceso.
We also run training events right now, actually, that is meant to help the community understand the data that come down. We do have software that process data up to a certain level.
Josie dice que el chat está lento. Bueno, sí, está muy lento el chat, justamente porque quedó ajustado así de la última vez. Vamos a corregirlo.
The basic processing of those data, how they might be able to analyze them in greater detail, and we provide tools for that.
Somos muy poquitos ahora, así que sí puede estar inclusive hasta sin demoras ese chat.
From Jeff Faust. What is the status of launch vehicle readiness for Webb? Ariane 5 has not launched in 9 months, and there are reportedly payload fairing issues on past Ariane 5 launches. How many Ariane 5 launches are scheduled ahead of Webb? And if those are delayed for any reason, will Webb's launch also slip? Greg?
Bueno, dice que el Ariane 5 no ha sido hasta ahora lanzado por mucho tiempo. Dice si no se esperan retardos, demoras. Tenemos otros 3 antes de ese lanzamiento.
So they're going through the process of getting the rocket ready for the upcoming launch.
Dice, estamos en el proceso de tener el cohete pronto para la fecha prevista.
Following that schedule, they're providing us updates on that. And once they launch,
Canon dice, menos mal que lo lanzan en un Ariane y no en un Vega, porque a la hora que lo lanzan en un Vega,
Thank you. Another question for Greg. From Leah Crane. How do you plan to ensure the spacecraft safety during shipping?
El plan para asegurar justamente el transporte. Estamos trabajando con el gobierno, dice, para justamente asegurarnos de la seguridad y los riesgos que se corren, ¿no? La idea es que sea justamente un viaje seguro, ¿no? Es lo que estábamos hablando.
Thank you. A question from
No, sin detalles, obviamente, como
Any other
esperábamos.
solar system observation of targets in the first year, like Europa, Titan, Uranus, Neptune, and their moons? Could go to Klaus or Eric.
Yeah, I can take that. So there's a fair amount. I believe it's 5 or 6% of the time is spent in the solar system. So Webb can observe any solar system object outside of the orbit of Mars, and so that in effect actually does include programs in Cycle 1 to observe the Jovian system, moons, Uranus, Neptune.
Le está preguntando si podrían observar parte del sistema solar y está diciendo que sí, que efectivamente que el Hubble ha dedicado un 6% de su capacidad a eso y van a tener muy buena cobertura, sí, seguramente. Y bueno, nombró algunos planetas y lunas.
Can you say something about the process of how Webb will be transported to French Guiana? How will that be done? How long will it take?
Están preguntando sobre el proceso de envío a la Guayana. Dice, ¿nos puedes decir algo de eso? Dice que van a ir en un navío francés dentro de un contenedor C5.
There are 7 bridges between the airstrip and the processing facilities, which would not withstand the loads of JWST going across them. So we had not much of a choice but to go by ship. We will leave from California. We will go down around through the Panama Canal and then
van a ir de California a través del canal de Panamá.
You have to account for getting through the canal. That could take a couple extra days. So 12 to 14, 15 days it takes to get there.
Entre 14 y 15 días le lleva a llegar. El contenedor dice que tiene un sistema de control ambiental o sea, para proteger la integridad de ambiente
Thanks, Bill. Let's open it up. Do
del,
any of the reporters in the room have any
del
questions?
telescopio, y que va a ir personal a bordo del barco, inclusive para ir monitorizando constantemente el tema.
Hi, thanks so much. Chelsea Goad with space.com. I know
Space.com.
that Webb and Hubble will be obviously operating at the same time if all goes according to plan, which it seems like it will. Is there any plan for the instruments to take co-measurements in any way? Will researchers be able to apply to use both telescopes? Will there be any
Dice
sort of
que como el Hubble
collaboration
y
on
este
orbit?
van a estar trabajando al mismo tiempo, va a haber un tiempo que van a estar juntos.
In the
Dice,
first
si hay,
cycle,
está
we're not
previsto de que
combining
los
the
investigadores
simultaneous
puedan
observations
utilizar
from one observatory with the
observaciones
others.
simultáneas
So
desde el
just a
Hubble
step too
y desde
far
este
for
nuevo
cycle one,
telescopio,
but
¿no?
it's definitely something that is considered.
Se colgó el Zoom.
The only thing that we're trying to do early in cycle one is what's called the early release science program, which is it's a minor fraction of the total time available. It's about 500 hours, and that program is intended to provide the community with data, everybody in the community, not just the ones who won time, because we realize that it's a highly oversubscribed observatory, and we don't want to keep anybody out. So it's important for us that the full
Dice, no vamos a dejar a nadie afuera de ese,
goes for
¿no?
exciting science that's based in cycle 2, that's based already on observations done in cycle 1, and so that's the reason for the early release science programs. And there are 13 programs that were selected for those 500 hours. The range, across a wide range of science and instrument modes that was really meant to demonstrate how well instruments can do the
Está hablando de las
science
primeras
that
500
we
horas de
need
uso,
to
¿no?
do,
Que van a
and to
demostrar
help others
justamente
get an
cómo
understanding for that.
funciona.
All the data that is taken in the early release science program is immediately available.
Todos los datos que tomen en las primeras horas de uso, y se va a estar
Thank you.
disponible.
There's another question here about infrared from Christopher Wondrek. Similarly, what's different between Webb's orbit and Spitzer's orbit? And why are they different if both of them are infrared? Eric, would you like to take that?
Sure,
Está hablando cuál es la diferencia entre la órbita del Webb y
Spitzer used
no
what was
escuché si es
called
la
an
Hubble.
Earth trailing orbit, so it launched and it stayed along the same orbit as the Earth, gradually moving farther and farther away from the Earth during its lifetime. But it basically stayed around the same orbital path as the Earth.
Dice que lo que va a hacer es adelantarse a la Tierra en la órbita lentamente, ¿no?
So it could stay in this path and just make sure that its barrel wasn't focused looking at the sun or Earth. Now, we're going to L2, and as such, we will follow the Earth and the Moon around as they go in their orbit around the Sun, and we will always keep the sun shield facing the Earth, Moon, and Sun, because our telescope doesn't have a tube or a baffle around it. It's a naked telescope. So both of these observatories use different strategies to get away from the Earth itself.
Dice, los dos observatorios, me imagino que lo está comparando con el Hubble, dice, tratan de colocarse fuera, o sea, lejos de la influencia, o sea, protegidos por la Tierra, para mantenerse fuera de la influencia de los infrarrojos, dice, para poder justamente captar bien eso, ¿no?
This is from Marcia Dunn. Are there spare parts for many, if not all, the telescope parts? So there's a backup in case of failure.
¿Hay un backup de repuestos en caso de falla?
We will not
Bill,
be
would you like to
making-
take that?
I'll take a cut and then pass on to Bill.
Yeah, go ahead.
There is parts that we have available as we were building this up on the ground. And most of them become what we call engineering models, like
Tenemos muchas partes antes de esto, pero dice, muchas de esas cosas las llamamos modelos de ingeniería para simular anomalías en tierra, dice, ¿no? Generalmente tenemos una cosa igual, algunas veces dos o tres. No, ese segmentos hay segmentos de espejo de más, hay uno o dos nada más. No hay como para armar otro telescopio.
to have them available in small quantities for the things that are big, or maybe one.
Lauti no dijo las diferencias de la web y la de el Spicer, creo. Hoy habían hablado que justamente la órbita era una L2. Dice, no tenemos como para fabricar otro telescopio. Sí, lo van a colocar en uno de los puntos Lagrange, en el L2. Eso lo dijeron ya hace un rato, eso está confirmado.
And Klaus, you could probably pronounce that correctly.
Yeah, Oumuamua. Yeah, so that was one of the interstellar interlopers, comets from another system that came through. Yes, I mean, I'm sure that Webb observations of new future objects like that will provide data and information about them that will make it much clearer what their origin is.
Creo que no lo escuché, pero creo que le preguntaron si podían llegar a ver un objeto como el Oumuamua, y dijo que bueno, que es muy interesante poder hacer eso, sí, o sea, como que sí, no lo afirmó, pero sí.
In fact, that's why we built this observatory, is to answer that very question. Right now, I think the record redshift holder is something a redshift of 11, a little bit beyond 11. So if the universe behaves as we think it might, we could, and objects are as bright as we think they might be, we could reach redshifts of maybe 12, 13, maybe even 14.
Dice, está hablando del nivel de rojos, 11, 12 y hasta 14 inclusive.
So it's difficult now to predict ahead of time what's that limiting redshift.
No saben cuál es el límite que van a alcanzar cuando lo consigan, cuando lo pongan a andar, pero estiman que va a ser por ahí.
Let's ask some of the questions that came in from social media. So this is from Instagram. How are you planning to take care of the mirror in space? There's probably objects like meteors which could collide with the mirror and break
¿Cómo
it.
van a hacer para cuidarlo en el espacio? Dice, justamente por los objetos que puedan llegar a golpearlo.
Maybe Eric can jump in. One of the things I'd want to say is we endure the space environment, but first of all, it's been characterized by us by some other telescopes or instruments that are out there like Gaia and Herschel and Planck, so we know what the micrometeorite environment is in L2, and this is designed to withstand that, meaning it will get hit with micrometeorites, and with that it has the toughness to go its entire mission life with, call it, small blemishes, and the mirror itself and the sun shield in terms of pinholes, and we prove that out by actually taking this hardware into a micrometeorite accelerator chamber, and we just, we bombarded a mirror segment.
Dice que lo que hicieron fue justamente para probar la integridad de esto es colocarlo en una cámara y simular con partículas muy aceleradas como para degradarlo, y se ha degradado realmente muy lentamente, ¿no?
And has enough robustness in its design. So basically it's designed to be tough enough to hang out there.
Básicamente está diseñado muy robusto como para poder soportar el daño del tiempo, ¿no? Me imagino que no lo dijo, pero en el lapso de la misión en que se espera, ¿no?
I was going to follow up. Scott's exactly right. And the way we specified the observatory's capabilities took that all into account, so that even after experiencing all that, it still meets the science needs.
Igual, inclusive, aún después de eso, el telescopio, o sea, el observatorio, va a seguir cumpliendo con las necesidades originales.
Klaus, would you like to take that?
¿Cómo puede ayudar a las generaciones que todavía no existen, ¿no?
I mean, it's clear that Webb has pioneered a whole long list of new technologies, and once we're in orbit and we're operating, we'll have a lot of things to learn about how that technology works, and I know some of that flows already into the next generation of space telescopes. So there's an ongoing process that's been going on for a few years in the US anyway. It's called the Decadal Survey, which is the process with which the American astronomical community gets together and decides on what are the highest priorities, what does the science need in terms of future technology and future hardware and future telescopes.
Dice que han estudiado entre toda la comunidad de científicos justamente cuáles son las cosas que se van a necesitar. O sea, han hecho una predicción de necesidades para el futuro, ¿no?
A lot of the concepts for future telescopes that are in that report are based on lessons learned from previous space telescope, including Hubble, and it also includes lists of new technologies.
¿En qué cohete lanzarán? Pregunta Miller, en un Ariane 5.
So that'll be very exciting.
Esperan que sea así el telescopio del futuro ¿no?
What are you most excited about with the telescope?
That's a good question. I think we all have it in mind. There are all the great science that is being indicated.
¿En qué nos va a cambiar el telescopio esto, no?
We don't know about yet. So I think that will be I think the whole deployment and early operations.
Estamos muy felices de ver todo lo que vamos a poder descubrir con esto, pero es obvio, una pregunta genial.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask all of our speakers for their closing thoughts.
Fabián, leí tu pregunta. Fabián C, lo reviso ahora después.
It's tough going back and forth with the mask and glasses at the same time. So again, thank you for participating. I think it's very important to continue the interest and the excitement around Webb. You've heard it's going to produce amazing science, science that we've never even thought of.
Bueno, estamos muy felices de que esto va a producir muchísima ciencia y para las próximas generaciones.
So again, appreciate that. We are getting close to ship and launch.
Estamos muy cerca ya de enviarlo al sitio de lanzamiento.
And I will be excited as well, looking for those little images. And I do have 3 young grandsons. They like to watch launches, so we do a lot of that around the TV. And
tengo 3 nietos que les gustaría ver el lanzamiento, dice, por supuesto, en la tele.
In about a year. So again, thank you.
Y bueno, que a partir de un año van a empezar a verse las imágenes.
From a project standpoint, we are extraordinarily excited about where we're going in the next few months.
Estamos muy contentos de lo que va a suceder dentro de los próximos meses, el transporte, el proceso de lanzamiento y luego la operación y luego obviamente lo que es ciencia, ¿no?
So it makes it about a 19-year-old. I got 20 and 18-year-old daughters that are in college already, so we want this one out of the house. So get the middle child, out of here and on orbit.
Están dando las palabras finales de bueno, lo que significa para cada uno de ellos, dice su historia con su los años que hace que están desarrollando esto, digo, ¿no? Que sus hijos ya han crecido, obviamente. No lo están diciendo, pero es brutal. Yo no lo diría, ¿no? Por las demoras que ha tenido todo esto, ¿no?
Begoña?
So it has been, I think, an amazing journey with all the comments that have been said.
Ha sido una jornada increíble, con todos los comentarios. Y esta es una colaboración internacional, tenemos de varios equipos, de varios países. Estamos casi ahí, ¿no? Y bueno, y obviamente que queremos ver las operaciones en órbita, ¿no? A medida que nos acercamos al lanzamiento, todos esos esfuerzos juntos están culminando, ¿no? Bueno, esto para poder explorar el espacio más profundo, dice, está cerca, ¿no?
Yeah, I would say I can't wait for the day when we sit at a console and look at the first science data.
Dice, en realidad no me aguanto de ver, estoy ansioso por ver el día en que nos lleguen los primeros datos de este telescopio cuando esté operativo.
We have speculated, we
Hemos
know where our
especulado
limitations
muchísimo,
are.
¿no?
We can only
¿Cuáles son nuestras
extrapolate
limitaciones?
so far. So the day that the data come down and the rubber hits the road, it will be a fantastic day.
Va a ser fantástico. No me aguanto,
The
dice,
whole
¿no?
world will not have to wait long.
Así que
to
todo el
share
mundo
that
no va a tener que
and
esperar
see
mucho,
that
dice el
data
mundo entero para eso, ¿no?
when they're available.
Thank you so much to all of our experts and to all of the reporters who came out and to everyone who participated online and the audience at home. Please keep asking us questions and we'll be responding to them. You can write to myself, Laura Betts, or Omar Torres if you'd like further interviews set up. For the reporters, we're happy to accommodate you. And if you have any other questions about the telescope,
Bueno,
online,
están finalizando
don't hesitate.
la conferencia,
NASA
¿no?
Web and Ask NASA. Thanks so
Así
much
que
for the
bueno,
privilege of your
que
time.
se
Have
hagan
a
todas
wonderful
las
rest of your
preguntas
day. Take care.
a través de la web, que las van a responder también. No están así, yo he hecho preguntas y no las responden. Pero bueno, puede que algunas sí las respondan. Gracias a todos, gracias Marina, ni que hablar por ese enlace que perdimos, porque esto estaba previsto en un sitio web de Northrop Grumman y increíblemente no sé, cambiaron el lugar, no estaba en el mail de distribución de prensa que recibimos regularmente de NASA, así que casi que nos perdimos todos, bueno, pero por suerte hubo un poco de este tema. Voy a leer los últimos mensajes, así ya pasamos a cerrar esta transmisión, ¿no? Ponemos un poquito de música para acompañarnos y a ver si me he perdido algo. Bien pensadas las preguntas, no están dejando escapar un solo detalle, dice Marina. El 1 de octubre de este año, decía Canon, el retraso. Dice, ahora anuncian el retraso hasta el 2030, decía Timbo, que era una broma, ¿no? Obviamente. ¿En qué cohete lanzarán? En un Ariane 5. Si no van a utilizar el Hubble, dice Canon Lucas, yo feliz lo acepto. No, va a estar utilizándose el Hubble conjuntamente con esto. Esa fue una de las preguntas que le hicieron. Si podía haber utilización paralela, o sea que colocaran los dos telescopios al mismo objetivo para hacer una comparación. Y dijo como que no estaba previsto, pero que sí, que obviamente es un punto a tener en cuenta, a considerar para las futuras investigaciones científicas. Recuerden que este telescopio va a ser lanzado desde la Guayana Francesa por la Agencia Espacial Europea en un Ariane 5 el 31 de octubre próximo, por lo que dijo en horario de la mañana. Dicen que tienen que lanzar en horas de la mañana. Me imagino que por la posición de la Tierra con respecto al Sol, que es lo que interesa, ¿no? Este helicóptero va a estar colocado en una órbita que se llama Lagrange L2. Si quieren realmente saberlo y fácil, se los digo, lanzamientosespaciales.com es un sitio amigo, ¿sí? Tienen tipos de órbita, acá, exactamente acá, tipos de órbita, ¿sí? Y bueno, tiene un montón de explicaciones. Seguramente las órbitas de Lagrange están aquí, a ver si las vi, no la vi, quizás me la pasé, pero seguramente está, y si no está, es muy posible que Alex esté allí ya corrigiéndolo para agregarlo. Quizás no está porque yo no la vi. Recuerden que el calendario tiene todos los lanzamientos del mes, se los recomiendo profundamente, y ya que estamos, les recomiendo dos cosas más, ¿sí? Les voy a recomendar un sitio amigo, ¿sí? Que es de Darien, el amigo Darien, Explorando el Espacio. Explorando el Espacio hace unos resúmenes semanales de noticias que son realmente increíbles. Este es el último de hace 2 días. Se enteran de todo lo que sucedió en la semana muy fácilmente. Les recomiendo que vayan al sitio de entonces de Explorando el Espacio, que realmente lo van a disfrutar. Y por último, bueno, visiten la tienda nuestra, así nos apoyan también. Hay excelentes prendas, excelentes oportunidades. Síganos en las redes, suscríbanse al canal, activen las notificaciones. Nos vemos en la próxima dentro de unas poquitas horas desde Wallops, Virginia, con el lanzamiento de un pequeño cohete, un experimento de la NASA que van a lanzar un gas en la atmósfera para poder apreciar algo parecido a una pequeña aurora boreal, pero en realidad es para estudiar la transmisión de energía en la atmósfera. Así que, bueno, con esto y con lo que vimos, cortada, no fue entera porque ya lo dijimos, tuvimos un tema con el sitio originalmente entregado por NASA a la prensa, así que no la tenemos completa la conferencia, pero bueno, así será. Un abrazo grande, ahora sí, voy a estar en segundos nuevamente en Discord, como me enteré de este enlace. Gracias Marina, gracias a todos, nos vemos entonces, nos vemos ya en Discord. Scotty, teletranspórtame a Discord, por favor.